Ben, Scott, thanks for taking time out of this, crazy SRS 2024.
Excited to be here, Joe. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
And Scott, I mean, you've been here since the very first. What do you think about this?
Oh, it's super exciting. As I sent a LinkedIn post today, it's like robots everywhere. So it's a very exciting time because it's still the first inning of this next generation of digital surgery with robots and advanced visualization agents and advanced AI. It's just such an exciting time. My hope is we accomplish a little more the next 10 years. I think we've taken the last 10 to set the table, but no, it's very exciting. And from VIP and the whole team, they've done an incredible job building this into what it is today.
And I think it's sort of meritorious to point out the people who support this are the big players in the industry as well. You know, Intuitive up front, Medtronic up front, J&J up front, even without them having robots. That just shows how important this category is to healthcare.
Well, it's the future of surgery, Joe. As we talk about how this category is going to evolve, Scott mentioned it. We see that we're laying the foundation, but we're going to see in the next 10, 20 years, we're going to see advances in visualization, advances in the way that we access tumors or critical structures. It's the future.
So let's pull back a little bit because I know my audience may or may not be familiar with Cytalux and On Target. And before we went live, I asked Ben, what are we going to call it? You said one thing, Scott says another. So I want to start there.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start
We just wanted more airtime, Joe.
That's the only way to do it, right? A little debate.
That's it. So Ben, how would you start out with the platform? What would you call it, and where does it sit in the continuum right now?
Yeah, so as we think about the platform, interoperative molecular imaging, Cytalux enables surgeons to see the unseen, effectively being able to identify cancer, tumors that are very difficult to detect today under current modalities, palpation and white light visualization. Often we see them on the CT, you see them in advance, but when you're in the moment, in real time, operating and creating an intervention on the part of the patient, it allows surgeons to see exactly where they would resect, where they would plan that surgical operation with the aid of Cytalux and fluorescence to do it.
I'm going to slide it over to sort of, the Sherpa in digital surgery, but he's going to call it something else.
Well, you mentioned digital surgery, and so I try and think of things in that framework. And so digital surgery's up here. Digital surgery can be open, lap, robotic, or combinations thereof. So robotic surgery, this meeting, actually has a lot of elements of digital surgery, and it's a part of their agenda. But in order to kind of move to that future of surgery 4.0, you need advanced robots, you need advanced visualization, you need connected platforms for AI. All of these are elements that enable these improvements. So the difference was, I would call it On Target, because we see ourselves being able to enable enhanced visualization of anatomy. Today, it's with our first drug, Cytalux, in ovarian and lung, which will also go to colorectal and also go to prostate. But I see a future where we're going to need to be able to identify other anatomies. We've seen the benefits of ICG and what it's done. There's lots of things like that to identify nerves, to identify anatomic structures. I know, having tried to work the last 7, 8, 9 years on AI to identify specific structures, it's really hard for AI. Even with 30,000 images at 30 frames per second, it's amazing what AI, large language models have done. You can identify every four-legged animal, every species of every four-legged, all the way down to, the nth degree. But if I say to the people at Google, here's all these videos of a lap chole, can you identify the cystic duct? Not so well, not so good, even with all of that data. Now, I think we're going to get there, but I could go show you 10 videos and you'd be able to do it pretty well. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer of saying that On Target has this big vision of being intraoperative imaging agents which enhance AI capabilities to identify anatomical cellular structures to help guide and improve surgery. Cytalux, I love his focus on the first 4 applications. We were joking in our leadership meeting, you need to have someone with their heads in the clouds and someone with their feet on the ground.
That's right.
So Ben's keeping our feet on the ground while, I'm trying to stretch
The
it
yin
into
and yang, I
into
love
the
the
clouds.
partnership here.
You need the mix.
Ben, is it fair to say then that, all this banter about AI right now that we hear, and but what's the base value of AI without high fidelity data?
That's exactly right. And I was just watching the news the other day, Joe, and they were talking about the immense amount of energy and investment required for AI and the AI future that we all envision. And one of the ways that we can help accelerate that is, as Scott mentioned, providing more efficient data, more high fidelity data. And in the case of Cytalux, we're talking about near infrared imaging outside of the visible spectrum of the human eye that specifically targets cancer. And as we start to break apart that data stream, let's talk about the different fields or the different elements of that data stream, the length of the fluorescence, the intensity of the fluorescence, the duration of the fluorescence that allow us to be that much more precise in how we train these AI systems and inform them so that we can make better decisions as a society on resections and interoperatively how do we improve overall care for patients.
So this adds a level of advisement to the surgeon, obviously, right? So as I'm going in there, and lay out a classic procedure for me of how does Cytalux declare itself in a sort of a lung cancer case?
Yeah, let's talk about lung cancer is a great example. We have a patient that presents with a sub-centimeter lesion, perhaps already had a prior surgery. And they show up and detect it on a CT scan, and the surgeon begins to make a plan to say, what, I want to do a tissue-sparing approach. We're seeing a lot of momentum behind tissue-sparing procedures in the field and being able to take out less and having similar outcomes for these patients. As a surgeon evaluates a 2-dimensional CT, they now need to translate that into the OR as they engage with a 3-dimensional patient with a collapsed lung that is now moved and is mobile. Cytalux then allows them to illuminate that location, which will be a different location than it was on the CT. If it's below the pleural surface, how difficult is it to find a lesion that's below the pleural surface? It'll illuminate those as well. One of our surgeons gave a great analogy as they talked about using Cytalux. Often finding these lesions are like finding a small little marble or a piece of sand in a sponge. And so being able to illuminate that in the moment that they're resecting, Cytalux give them that capability. They'll place their stapler based on that location and resect, and then be able to look for any occult disease that might have gone undetected with preoperative scans. And so with those elements, we're able to evaluate margins, localize the tumor, and look for occult disease, and overall improve the outcomes for the procedure.
And that would carry over to other therapeutic uses as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and where we have approval in ovarian, and then the same hypothesis will play out in colorectal, prostate, and other applications. Is it fair to say another analogy would be like wearing infrared 3D goggles where, hey, you can go from here and through a maze in a dark room, feeling your way around, but you're not able to, hey, put goggles on, I can go fast, I can avoid things, I can take fewer steps, I can go faster and be more precise. Is that a fair analogy?
No, I think that's an absolute accurate analogy.
And so there's an overall trend in all these areas of surgery, something going back even to Volcano where we talked about precision-guided therapy, started using that term over and over. Let's treat the right patient the right way. Let's not over-treat. Where should we put a stent, not put a stent, should we stent? Optimizing all those, but you need information. And in that case, we had anatomical information from IVUS, we had physiologic information with FFR. Same thing here. You've got anatomical information from visualization. This is providing almost some physiologic information from the biology. Those together only increase your sensitivity and your specificity of the diagnostic. It also democratizes surgery and the performance. That's a big part that's missed often with robotics. They're like, hey, this person's outcome and this person's outcome weren't that much different. That's not the right analysis. The right analysis is taking all the surgeons, and if you can get the bottom 80% now up to performing like the top 10% performing like the Vit Patels and Santiago Horgens, that's a huge benefit. But when you're doing a clinical study, that's hard to do. You're taking the best and the best and doing the case. It's hard to show the difference, but it's the same way on a factory floor. They're using a robot to take total quality management, to take error margin out of things. So this is added information that's dramatically going to democratize performance and allow more standard of care from an outcome standpoint.
The other thing I'd add to that, in addition to democratizing, improving the standard of care and outcomes, there's also efficiencies here.
Yeah.
And so you're able to, if you think about the time it takes to localize, the time it takes to mark in advance of a procedure, all of that is shrunk or eliminated. And so you have improved outcomes plus improved efficiency.
So we're at our SRS here. It's a robotics show. Like there's nothing else here.
Yeah.
Robotics are better access, more precise access, accelerating level of competence.
Yep.
So does the Cytalux platform then become applicable in any of these applications on the robotic side?
There's no better application than a robotics application for Cytalux. You think about all of the benefits that robotics has brought, that you just highlighted there, Joe. The other thing robotics has done is they've pulled the surgeon away from the bedside. And so the idea of palpation, which has been the gold standard of cancer detection for eons, is removed. And so
moving from open, just to minimally invasive, to a degree, eliminates the level of palpation. But then tactile or haptic feel with an instrument, you still have some level. But robotics, you're even one step further away from hepatic or palpation. So now you need more information to retain the information you had at this level to go to robotics.
That's exactly right. And so this idea of loss of haptic feedback, loss of palpation is a tool to identify and confirm the location of the tumor. The need for improved optics, the need for improved enhanced visualization becomes all the greater in those cases.
And so now, Joe, also, if you have that higher sensitivity and specificity of the information, AI, et cetera, you can imagine like a CNC machine, right? With border milling to, and the like, hey, I can almost program in where I want to excise this tumor. Same thing we were looking to do in hernias, where you said, okay, if I know exactly the information, I could program in and have the robot sew upside down and sew the hernia mesh in. That seemed like a first candidate for automating steps of a procedure. Driving a car. The first steps you're going to do to automate are the simple things. Parallel parking, So are there some simple steps that you can start thinking of in the next 10 years, future-wise, to start automating with robots and democratizing? Yeah, when you have better information anatomically, then you can do that with the robot.
This is what I love about our industry, and especially product platforms like Cytalux, because it becomes an unlock for other devices to solve the problem. Because we've always had devices that have solved the problem with the limitations we know. Now we've removed some limitations, and now we possibly create brand new categories of products to perform the procedure.
Totally, it reminds me of that quote that you can flip around. Is necessity the mother of invention, or is invention the mother of necessity? And it's funny because the phone gets invented and then it creates all these necessities, right?
Exactly.
So the robot gets invented, now there's becomes these necessities. It's not just the other way around. It's an equation that works both ways, where hey, this invention would enable better open surgery. It would enable, but it also now enables a whole movement.
It could change access. It could change the type of robot you use. Right. So in the past, people would say, yeah, but palpitation. Yeah, but we got Cytalux.
Right.
Okay, let's look at the problem from another angle right now. Less costly, higher throughput, better outcomes. So I think products like Cytalux can actually bring down the cost of the new solutions on the robotic side.
Yeah, we believe it's going to be proven. We're doing those studies that you're going to have less recurrence, or recurrence may take longer. We're going to do a better job excising. That has huge cost benefits. over time to the healthcare system. More importantly, it has huge patient benefits as well.
As you think about the complexity question of healthcare is always immensely complex, and good innovation brings simplicity. So today, when we place a fiducial, when we mark the cancer in advance so that the surgeons have some type of roadmap to go towards, it's an entire procedure before surgery. It's a procedure before the procedure to do that. Cytalux replaces that preoperative procedure with an IV.
So we're at mid-year 2024. You raised a nice round last year, brought in some great investors, which just sort of validates the legitimacy of the technology and the platform. What should we be looking at for Cytalux over the next 18, 24 months?
Yeah, I think, as Scott mentioned, there's great momentum in lung, and we continue to drive that forward and to see the excitement around our first indications in lung cancer and ovarian cancer. But as we look to the future, we have an aspiration of covering the majority of all of the inpatient surgical oncology procedures that happen in the US and by extension globally. So additional indications such as colorectal, such as prostate, looking at other solid tumors. Because ultimately our vision is that this type of capability will be available to any cancer patient that's going in for surgery.
Yeah, so I would categorize it this way. We're having a phenomenal launch and commercialization that's been occurring over the last 9 months. We've got a great partner in Stryker and their 1788 camera that is synergistic with this. I think there are going to be additional cameras that have that capability to also image this over the next 24 months. That just makes more patient access available for us. But Stryker is our partner and a great partner. We've got great investors in J&J and Olympus that were part of the last round. So you've got large strategics in support of the company. He mentioned the great news that we got since that last financing was we had different drugs in the pipeline for some of these other indications. We now believe from our data, Cytalux can do those. So that makes it cheaper and faster to get the product, an imaging agent, Cytalux, to the market for those indications. So that's a huge positive that will prove out in the next 18 to 24 months and launch as well. So exciting times, not just for us, but for our partners like Stryker. I think this helps them get their camera in more thoracic labs to begin with, which creates other benefits, as well as patients as we expand into these other indications.
And the investors have to be looking at this because when we look at classic med tech, we've got long development times, R&D, supply chain, manufacturing. Scott, I know when you and I chatted about this early, you were on the phone with me telling about it, like, this is just a no-brainer on the business side.
Yeah, the exciting, things have changed over the last 30 years. It's become more challenging in my career just because regulatory hurdles are higher, commercialization challenges are much harder. Everything just takes longer, costs more capital. Here, you basically have software margins because you're essentially a pharmaceutical. And so very, very high margin products, therefore not a lot of inventory costs. So to get to a cash flow break even is a much lower revenue run rate, less capital, but you're able to create a tremendous amount of value for patients, the healthcare system, and therefore investors. So it has more of pharma-like margins and the like, and business fundamentals than med tech.
You think about a lot of the fundamental risks to a business: regulatory risk, clinical development, commercial risk. A lot of those components, we talked about, all of those have been really de-risked. So we have regulatory approval, we have ability to manufacture, we have the ability now to begin to roll this out commercially. And that's really we've de-risked so much of the business, it's really about just beginning to take it to the masses.
Yeah, if you look at the market potential here, what got me excited is, as you know, is always how big a clinical impact you can have. But that clinical impact reflects back into value creation. And this can be $1 billion business. What does $1 billion drug, sell for? Like, what's its market value? Mm-hmm. Substantially more than $1 billion revenue med device product, because you're at 90% margins instead of 65-70% margins. Your EBITDA is much higher as well. And then it just takes less capital to get to that scale. So
Correct.
that's exciting from the financial side and the return side.
Well, gentlemen, I appreciate your time. As always, Scott, I always love catching up with you. Ben, good finally for us to get together for sure.
It's a pleasure. Thank you,
Appreciate
Joe.
it, Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Joe Mullings from SRS 2024. Be well.